Prologue. Before time, there was only light. Not light as we know it, bound by stars, shadows, or the rise and fall of day, but something alive, a force, a presence. It was the essence of the Creator, infinite and unchanging, yet constantly flowing outward in waves of love and purpose. It filled everything and stretched beyond comprehension, touching the very edges of existence. From this light, heaven was born, a realm of pure beauty. Golden streets rippled like molten sunlight, alive with a brilliance that seemed to sing. Rivers of living water wove through the vast expanse, their surfaces glimmering as though carrying the breath of creation itself. The skies were an ever-changing masterpiece, alive with colors that danced and folded into one another with every thought of the Creator. And the Creator was not alone. At the heart of the light was unity, Father, Son, and Spirit. The Father, the source of all, the Son, the Word through whom all things came to be, and the Spirit, the presence that moved within the light itself, shaping and guiding. Together they spoke heaven into being, every detail crafted with purpose and love. It was perfect, but it was silent. Heaven was a masterpiece waiting for its chorus. The silence ended with a word. "Let there be life." The Father spoke, his voice resonating through eternity. It was the Word, the Son, who carried the command into being, his hands shaping the essence of the light into forms. The Spirit moved through it all, binding the creation together in perfect harmony. From the brilliance of the light emerged the first beings, their forms radiant and pure, their wings unfurling like flames igniting for the first time. The angels opened their eyes to see the one who had made them. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their very existence was an act of worship. They were reflections of their Creator's glory, their hearts brimming with joy and purpose. There was no time here, only an eternal now, where they simply were. But even among the countless beings of light, there was one who had not yet been formed. The Father turned to the Son, and the Son smiled, stepping forward. This creation would be different. The Word moved with care, his hands drawing from the very core of the Father's light. From this essence, he shaped a being of unparalleled radiance. The Spirit wove through the process, binding the light together with threads of purpose and beauty. Slowly, the figure emerged. The angels paused in their work, drawn by the brilliance taking form before them. The being stood tall, his figure majestic and flawless. His long black hair flowed like silk, catching and reflecting the light of heaven. His face was striking, a sharp, straight jawline, high cheekbones, and eyes so piercingly bright they seemed to hold the colors of the skies within them. His golden skin glowed as though kissed by the sun, and his expression was calm yet joyful, full of life and purpose. As the Son stepped back, the being's wings unfolded for the first time, stretching wide. They were enormous, spanning farther than any angel's wings yet seen, each feather shimmering as if woven from strands of liquid gold and fire. When he moved, the light around him seemed to bend, as if heaven itself leaned in to acknowledge him. The Father's voice filled the space. "You will be called Lucifer, morning star, bearer of light." Lucifer opened his eyes, the movement slow and deliberate. His gaze locked onto the Son's, and for a moment, all of heaven seemed to hold its breath. Then he smiled, a smile that was pure, radiant, and full of joy. "I am alive," he said, his voice smooth and steady. It wasn't a question, but a realization. The Son stepped closer, his own expression warm and welcoming. "And you are loved," he said gently. "You were made to reflect the light of the Father, to carry it, to lead." Lucifer knelt before them both, his wings folding gracefully behind him. "To serve you is my joy, my purpose." The Father's light pulsed warmly, as though answering the morning star's declaration. "You will lead the host of heaven, morning star. My light will shine through you." The angels murmured softly among themselves, not with envy, but with admiration. There was a respect that rippled through their ranks like a wave, their wings shifting slightly in unison. The sun placed a hand on Lucifer's shoulder, his touch steady and grounding. "You are my brother," he said, his voice quiet yet firm, "and my steward. Together, we will carry out the will of the Father." Lucifer rose, his wings spreading wide once more. The light of heaven caught in his feathers, refracting outward in bursts of color that rippled across the crystal sea. He turned to face the angelic host, his piercing gaze softening as he looked at them. "Together," he said, his voice carrying easily over the murmurs, "we will honor him." That evening, if such a thing as evening could exist in eternity, the angels gathered near the sapphire court. It was here, beneath the ever-changing skies, that the first song rose. It began softly, one voice carrying a melody so pure it felt like the air itself had begun to sing. Others joined, their harmonies weaving together like threads of gold and silver. Lucifer stood at the edge of the gathering, his gaze fixed on the stars that burned above them. He didn't join the song at first, instead listening, letting the melody fill the spaces within him. Michael approached, standing silently beside him for a moment. "You're quiet," he said, breaking the silence with a faint smile. Lucifer's expression softened. "I'm listening." Michael chuckled. "You don't have to carry it all, you know. Let yourself feel it." Lucifer tilted his head slightly, his piercing eyes shifting to meet Michael's. "It's beautiful," he admitted, "but overwhelming." "It's meant to be," Michael said simply. He paused, then added, "You'll get used to it." Lucifer let the words settle before finally nodding. "Perhaps." And then, quietly, he began to sing. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a resonance that seemed to settle into the foundation of the melody, grounding it, giving it weight. The angels around him turned, their expressions warm, and some stepped closer, not to revere him, but to join him, their voices blending seamlessly with his. Michael smiled, folding his arms as he watched. "There," he said softly. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" Lucifer smirked, his voice steady as it rose with the song. "I suppose not." Above them, the skies burned brighter, and the crystal sea reflected the light of heaven's first chorus. It was perfect. It was harmony. And for the morning star, it was just the beginning. Lucifer stood alone at the edge of the crystal sea, its surface still and perfect, as if it held its breath just for him. The waters mirrored heaven in all its glory, the sapphire court glinting like firelight, the golden streets that stretched endlessly, the ever-changing skies alive with hues that no words could capture. But as Lucifer stared deeper into the reflection, his gaze settled on himself. For a moment his thoughts lingered on the artistry of his form, the shimmer of his golden wings as they stretched wide behind him, each feather catching and refracting the light like prisms. His hair, long and black as midnight, falling across his shoulders in contrast to the brilliance that surrounded him. His face, sharp and symmetrical, carried the serene confidence of one who knew his purpose. He was the morning star, and every part of him was a reflection of the Creator's glory. But none of that held his attention for long. It was the flicker that stopped him, the faintest ripple in the water's reflection. Small, imperceptible perhaps to anyone else. His image dimmed for the briefest moment, as though the light itself hesitated. His brow furrowed, and he leaned closer, his golden eyes narrowing. But the flicker was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving only the pristine surface behind. Lucifer straightened, his wings rustling softly as they folded. He told himself it was nothing, a trick of the water, and yet the faintest whisper lingered, buried somewhere in the back of his mind. He shook his head. Nothing. and Lucifer turned to see Michael descending toward him. The Son's presence was unmistakable, steady, and filled with the warmth of the Father's light. His robes moved like the air itself carried them. And though his face bore no shadow of arrogance, there was an authority in his gaze that seemed to hold the weight of heaven. Michael landed lightly beside him, folding his arms casually as he glanced at the sea. "Staring at yourself again?" Michael teased, folding his arms. Lucifer smirked, but the tension in his chest didn't ease. "Admiring the water," he said dryly. "It's a masterpiece after all." Michael laughed lightly, the sound warm and unforced. "It is. A reflection of the Father's love, like everything else." Lucifer tilted his head slightly, his gaze drifting back to the horizon. "Everything?" he echoed. "Everything," Michael said firmly. He gestured toward the sea, the skies, the distant spires of the sapphire court. Every star, every ripple, every sound. It's all his love made visible. Even your voice, brother. Lucifer turned to Michael, caught off guard. "My voice?" Michael smiled. "You sing, and the air moves with you. Do you think that's accidental? The Father's love is in every note you carry." Lucifer looked away, unsure how to respond. He let Michael's words linger in the air, their weight settling somewhere deep within him. After a moment, Michael clapped a hand on Lucifer's shoulder. "Come, the galaxies are singing today, and I need someone to keep me company." Lucifer arched a brow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And you chose me? The angels must be busy." "They are," Michael said, his grin widening. "And you need to stop brooding. Now, are you coming, or shall I leave you to admire your reflection a little longer?" Lucifer huffed a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Lead the way." Michael took off, his laughter trailing behind him like sunlight breaking through clouds. Lucifer followed, his golden feathers slicing through the air as they soared together. Below them, heaven stretched out in all its glory, rivers gleaming, gardens blooming, and the endless expanse of light that had no beginning and no end. As they soared upward, their wings slicing through the air, Lucifer felt the flicker again, not in the water but somewhere deeper. He pushed it aside, telling himself it was nothing. But the whisper lingered, faint yet persistent. As they climbed higher, the stars became clearer, their brilliance casting faint shadows across the spires of the sapphire court. Michael slowed, glancing over at Lucifer as they hovered just above the expanse. "Do you see it?" Michael asked, his voice quieter now. "How it all connects." Lucifer followed his gaze, his sharp eyes scanning the galaxies that stretched out before them. He saw the intricacy of it, the stars forming constellations, the rivers of light winding through distant realms, the harmony of it all. It was breathtaking, perfect, and yet... "I see it," he said finally. His voice was steady, but a faint edge lingered beneath the words. Michael studied him for a moment, but whatever he saw in Lucifer's expression, he chose not to name. Instead, he smiled. "Good." Lucifer forced himself to return the smile, though his thoughts lingered on the sea, the flicker, the whisper. It was nothing. And yet, even as they soared together, exploring the vast wonders of heaven, the whisper refused to fade.